Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Bobby Manning here, and welcome to a Wednesday edition of the Garden Report. Said we'd be back next week, but here we are a day later, 3 shows in a row, and welcoming back Samson Folk for conversation about Chris Boucher. And you've heard it by now. Celtics signed him to a 1-year minimum after trading George Nyang yesterday. A surprise series of moves after a pretty quiet month or so for them, maybe 2 months at this point since the salary dumps. So pleasant surprise at the start of August here. And I know you were just saying, Samson, you were surprised that he hadn't been signed to this point. I almost, in my mind, thought he was restricted for some reason, because those are all the guys that are still left floating around out there, the guys in restricted free agency. But he was unrestricted. Toronto hadn't brought him back. No one else did, even though there's pretty general need for backup big depth around the league. And certainly the Celtics need it more than anyone here. So adding him to the mix at that center position, where they had 3 completely unproven guys, or uncertain players at that position, is a big boost for this team that was starting to have some doubts about being competitive this year.
Yeah, I don't think he swings it all the way into being competitive, but this might be kind of a test year for him for when you guys get that. Well, maybe Boston fans have different ideas about this upcoming season, but I think it'll be tough to be at the top of the ladder without Tatum. But the next year, maybe if Boucher shows really well, because while Jake Fisher reported that Boston had liked Boucher, I hadn't heard that. Of course, Jake is more tapped in than me, but the teams that were going after Boucher in the trade market and kind of testing like how the Raptors felt was repeatedly for a couple years in a row, the Nuggets and the Suns. Both teams were looking to contend. They wanted Boucher as a fill-in piece who could help swing like a 6-minute stretch in a playoff game, who can help churn minutes in the regular season. And so Boston, I'm a little surprised that he ended up there, but I think he's an NBA quality player. He scores the ball efficiently. He has a ton of length and activity on defense, even if he is prone to making like mental mistakes. On a minimum, great, easy. I think this is awesome for the Celtics.
Yeah, and he's been playing in Toronto forever at this point. I saw Sham's tweet that he's all-time leading everything off Toronto's bench, which had me in the first half. I was like, wait, all-time points, assists, rebound? And then it was like, oh, off the bench. All right. He was there for 7 years, 400 games in a Raptors uniform, champion, obviously. And as I saw this morning, the last player left from the championship team in 2019, when he was effectively a rookie that year, playing for the first time in the league. So he's a veteran. He is 32.
Yep.
So he's pretty far into his career at this point. And he's a pretty versatile player, from what I can sense here. He's played center. He's played forward. It's definitely the biggest position in need on Boston's roster. And for him to be able to fill a couple different roles on that side of the ball, I think is really good. Along with the fact that he's experienced and has played in a lot of big games. And I think it follows up the trend, too, I was saying this morning, of the Celtics signing guys who have killed them in the past, because he's had some big games against Boston.
Yeah, he's also a grinder, like he has a little bit of that Dennis Rodman pass to the league where, like he's washing dishes and he didn't, as an adult, right? And he didn't have the, straightforward path of being like a star out of high school and then getting into college. He had this winding path where he was just kind of playing basketball as a young adult and got recruited and then started being like, oh, I'm talented, I'm skilled, I'm huge, and just worked his way through junior college in Oregon, and then all the way in the NBA and to the Warriors, to the Raptors, and obviously now with the Celtics. He was really well liked in Toronto. He is a guy who, I know Boston is like a hard hat city, so he always leaves everything on the floor. That's a huge staple of his game. He hits guarded threes. He will crash the offensive glass and he'll bust his hump every time he goes out there. So I think from that perspective, there's a good chance that, Celtics fans will really enjoy watching him on the team this season.
Yeah, and I was reading through the story you posted over on Raptors Republic, that you reshared from January there, and I'm going through it, and I'm like, whoa, he was the bright spot of the Tampa season. I totally
Yeah.
forgot there was a Tampa
Oh, dude,
season for
it's
Toronto.
horrible.
I mean, he definitely was starting to show out for them at a certain point there as they were coming out of the championship era and transitioning to what was next there. So at this point, a couple of years removed from that and showing the potential he had there, like I know cutting, big part of his game. He can knock down a corner three. He can play a couple different positions. He was part of that thing they were trying to do there where they were just playing long players at every position for a while with Nick Nurse. So he's been through a bunch of renditions of not only his own game, but also what that team was trying to do up there. And I think that puts him in a good position to be able to do a bunch of different stuff for Boston. He's going to have to this year.
I guess from like the way you guys played offense, do you expect it to change a lot heading
It
into this
has
upcoming
to.
season? So
It has to.
what kind of differences are you looking for from the Celtics?
So in Summer League, I was so pleasantly surprised to see three things from them. Faster pace, because by the end of the year, they were down to last in pace. I know that stat's wonky, but being last in it, I think, says something when you get down to that level. Playoffs, too, they were very slow. Brad Stevens even admitted that. So they have the personnel to play faster this year. They have a little more athleticism. So I think they need to utilize that. And then in the half court, this is the team that cut the 27th most in the league, I believe. They were bottom 5 or 6 in cutting, per game possessions. So that's something that's going to have to happen here too. And I heard Brad after the season and during Summer League on the broadcast talking about we have to play to the skill set of the players that we have now. And this was obviously a team that shot a lot of threes, played 5 out, played pretty methodical, hunting mismatches, and that slowed things down a little bit. And now where you aren't going to have as many mismatches, where you aren't going to be able to generate as many advantages with the talent you have here, I think you're going to have to play faster. I think you're going to have to be more active in the half court with the cutting and play calls and all that kind of stuff. And we even saw them experimenting with some pressing in Summer League too, which, we saw Indiana succeed and I think set the standard for doing that last year and really the last couple of years here. So those are all things I think that they can borrow from what's been shown to be successful around the league, but also works well for their own personnel here. And the cutting with Boucher really intrigues me because they've added a couple guys now that are pretty skilled cutters.
That's when I think about that Boston team, I always, even though they won a chip, and I thought obviously on the back of their defense, which was unbelievable, I thought the greatest limitation of their team was obviously Tatum had gotten to a pretty strong place as a playmaker, largely because of where he can get to on the floor, but they didn't have truly dynamic passing. And I think when you don't have truly dynamic passing, it's easier to not have a bunch of sequenced cutting that guys have to read while they're on ball. So just spacing out and making sure that reads are kind of where you expect them to be. Weak side.
I'll tell you
corner.
this because I know this for
Sure.
a fact. They didn't like cutting because it clogs up the paint. They wanted, really, they wanted that paint area open, and that's why they played so spaced out, had guys in the corners, wanted 5 shooters out there at almost all times because it opened up those driving lanes for Tatum and Brown and the driving kick game and all that. And it worked because of Jason Tatum and the personnel that they had. But that's going to have to change now, I think. I don't know if you agree with that.
I do agree with that. I also agree with you talked about Indiana, but also Cleveland and even Denver is you can still prioritize spacing while also sequencing cutting. There's a type of guard to dunker spot, forward to corner type of sequenced semicircle cut that the Cavs run all the time. And they prioritize spacing when the Celtics did this as well with Drew Holiday more than anybody, but moving a guard into the dunker spot still helps with spacing because it puts, a guard at the rim typically. I guess it depends who was guarding Drew at the time, but regardless, the passing, I'm really interested to see how it elevates for the Celtics and how they do with more motion in their offense, because more motion means that there's more potential for dynamic live dribble passing rather than drive and kick, which is usually pretty rote. Guys who are making live dribble, if there's a 45 cut, if there's a corner crash, either of which Chris Boucher will fit very well in. And I'm sure guys like Derek White obviously can make those reads as well as an off-ball player. I'm really interested to see where that develops for the Celtics offense, because this is like an in-between year where they get to try a lot of things.
Yeah, and so I'm seeing a lot of the projections slotting him in at the 4 next to Kata, and I guess that moves Sam Hauser to the bench in the lineup I've been envisioning, which I don't have a huge problem with. I would like to see one of Peyton Pritchard or Sam Hauser in the starting lineup just for continuity's sake and given what they've done here. But I understand wanting to mix and match lineups effectively to cater everybody's skill set. So I could see him starting. It might change night to night. But regardless of start, bench, whatever he does where he enters the game, what do you think his best role is in this offense, given the personnel that they have? Like, where's he going to fit in mostly in terms of his offensive skill set?
Well, if you guys, who's playing the 5 for you guys? Like, is that a definitive?
Probably Nemesh Keita. But Boucher
Okay.
could, right? Like, that's a possibility if they want to go even smaller, per se.
Boucher could, but I do think that's man coming from the Celtics team that I've known had like, what is it?
100 days ago, it was Porzingis, Al Horford, Luke Cornett. Now it's Chris Boucher or Nemesh Keita who's going to start. And maybe Luka Garza gets into this conversation.
Wow. and even Tatum, kind of, because he's such an impressive rebounder.
Yeah,
he can
was like
kind
a
of
center for them.
He can operate as a 4-5-2. Wow, this is. Yeah, well, Keita and Boucher, I think, is actually, while it's definitely a huge downgrade from the talent perspective, and the Celtics understand what they're doing going through this, but I think that's actually a pretty good fit because Keita kind of sits lower and around the rim, and Boucher is at his most effective, even though he does make mistakes sometimes in, what rotation, being a court coverage player who kind of sprints from baseline to base or sideline to sideline, trying to cover space and create turnovers and all that kind of stuff, playing fast, going the other way. I think as a 4 next to Keita, and especially with like playmaking defensive guards like White and Pritchard and Brown, we'll see, because they'll have a big offensive load this year, what his defense is like. I think he fits pretty well skill set wise in their starting lineup. But I gotta say, yeah, from the outside perspective, just remembering what this Celtics front court was to now what it's being is kind of like a shock.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm trying to pull it up here quickly, what he was from the corner this year. I don't know why I can't find him in this list here. Boucher. Yeah, there we go. 39% from corner 3 on 2 attempts a game. So it's a good area for him, cutting wise and shooting from there. And if they are going to be in a double big alignment, that gives them some size on the offensive glass. Kate is a great offensive rebounder, gives them more versatility defensively. And that's my next question for you is what kind of defender is he at this point in his career? Where's he going to fit best on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, it is in that, court coverage, because he's an extremely active defender, which makes him prone to huge plays. He's blocked. If he's not number 1, he's definitely like the top 5 in 3-pointers blocked over the past however many years. He really sprints out, chases shooters down, runs shooters off the line, which does pair pretty well with having Keita back at the rim, forcing guys downhill and into the mid-range. I think is a decent fit there. But he can obviously be like a weak side rim protector and rotate over, but it's not the strength of his game. You wouldn't want him switching out on a bunch of guys. It's not going to be like, he's not incredible at containment there. I think you mostly want him just making like big rotations, Xing out and covering the court. And he basically operates like a 3. He can get blocks, but a lot of them are not exactly because of size or because of chasing guys down, either from behind at the rim or on the perimeter for a 3-point shot. It's very rare that he goes and, meets somebody up with the law of verticality and blocks somebody. So I think playing like a 3/4 is probably around where he'll fit defensively.
Yeah, and that makes sense because he's a skinnier body. So I think the 5 is going to be a challenge for him at times, even though he has length, even though I'm sure they'll figure out some other ways to match up there that allows him to be in the best position defensively they can be. And I think about that with Keita too, because obviously before Boucher arrives, I'm thinking Keita's going to be logging 25, 30 minutes a game at the 5 spot. And he's a decent rim protector, but I think what he's shown best is roaming defensively and playing off non-shooters and trying to be disruptive inside there. And I think that's something they've utilized a lot under Joe Mazzulla, even going back to Ime Udoka, who probably spearheaded a lot of that in Boston. So that's the advantage to you playing double bigs. In some sense, is you can have those guys trade off responsibilities on the center depending on who it is. I've thought about Luka Garza playing in that dynamic too, just having him guard more of those traditional fives and letting Keita roam, letting a Boucher roam a little bit in that spot. So I think that's going to be crucial for them defensively, because with Holiday gone, with Horford gone, Cornet, a lot of those guys who were so versatile, even Porzingis could really get out on the perimeter and switch when he needed to. They're just not going to be able to mix and match where they put defenders the way they did in the past. Like, I think it's going to be, as you said, with Boucher, more matchup based, where he's only guarding threes, where he's only guarding fours as much as he can, and trying to keep him out of switches and not playing as much of a switch heavy defensive scheme as they've done the last couple of years. And really since that Ime year, they've switched about as much as anybody defensively, and they just don't have the personnel for that now. Like Keita, decent switcher. Boucher, I'm sure, can get out on guys a little bit, but like you said, that's not where you want him necessarily. And even like Derek White, Jaylen Brown, as great as those guys are defensively at times, they don't play up in position quite the same way Drew Holiday did.
Yeah.
Certainly Al Horford could really play up on some bigger guys. Like, there was just an interchangeability defensively they had that they don't have now. And I think, like, offensively, I think this team's going to be okay. Defensively, I think there's a lot of questions, especially with the personnel going out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think because that's actually Boucher. He scores the ball. He really does. If he's in a starting lineup that has Derek White and Peyton Pritchard and Jaylen Brown, and like Keita will occupy some sort of tag responsibilities, and Keita has obviously a bit of gravity because he's such a big target that guys will float towards him. There'll be openings for Boucher if he's starting, and he'll probably, my guess would be he'd be north of 60% true shooting. He'll give you, probably more points than the fan base is expecting, and he'll just clean up and take open shots and, crash the offensive glass and cut to the rim. And if they, like, obviously I think Pritchard can run the pick and roll decently well. Same with Jaylen Brown. Those pocket passes into, Chris Boucher to gather into the lane. He can finish above the rim. Like, he's a great dunker. He uses his length really well. He'll score. Defensively, though, yeah, the Celtics, I agree with you. Joe is, I think, a really brilliant coach. And I wonder what machinations he comes up with this season to kind of see what happens here.
Yeah, and I think this is going to test his flexibility too, because they did stuff that worked for a while to start his coaching tenure on this team. And I'm sure there's going to be some inclination of trying to maintain a lot of that stuff, even though it's different personnel. And I just don't think that's the way to go. Now, we saw them experiment a lot more last year with lineups, with schemes, with trying different things offensively, defensively. So I think he's shown an openness to trying different things, but doing it is, night to night and rolling with players through mistakes and all that sort of stuff. Because this is just such a reliable team. And honestly, a lot of his coaching was just leaning on those guys' observations, and specifically on the defensive end. Like, if Drew Holiday saw something, they could make a change. And even Luke Cornet, if he saw something, he had the power to switch up, what they were doing from that back line. And that's the killer of not having the same center room that they've had the last couple of years here. And you think of Horford, how long he's been here with playing with so many of these guys. There's just such a connectivity between guys, Brown, Tatum, and Horford especially, who have played together since 2017. And that's gone now when you think of Tatum being hurt and Horford being out the door here now.
Tatum,
So
I think Tatum is obviously a massive piece, but the thing that makes him so damn good is that he does not let you down defensively. He guards up, and he
was guarding
rebounds.
Towns that whole Knicks series.
Like the Pacers had to find somebody to guard Towns, and Pascal gave up like 25 pounds and did it, so they got to go to the finals. Like, having a guy, and Pascal is obviously more at power forward than Tatum is, but Tatum is so special, not because, like, if you go his raw numbers next to the other like top 5 guys who are in that conversation, he doesn't really match up in that sense. But it's the flexibility of his defense, and you can just do such funky lineups when he's out there. You can kind of try anything because he just glues everything together. He's like, he is both a superstar and like the ultimate glue to lineups, which is such a unique aspect of his game. So missing him and I guess they traded off like everybody to get around all this cap stuff. But Tatum, he's so impressive that, I'll be excited once he's back, obviously.
Yeah, and it's going to be a tough year without him. Once he is back, we'll see where the roster is, and there's definitely a lot of long-term stuff that they're trying to piece together here. But this move, I think, shows still a desire to be competitive, at least to start this year. And I was saying to you off the air, like, there's an advantage to doing a one-year deal from a cap standpoint, and that's, I think, a lot of the motivation of these moves is trying to lower that tax hit, trying to lower that cap hit, and this is a $3.3 million deal, but I think it comes in at 2.2 on the cap sheet, which with tax is significant. There's a weird rule that you get a discount on veteran minimum salaries. So this is actually like a $2 million deal for Boston, which is unbelievable when you think of what he's done. I was looking at the per 36 here, 21 last year per 36, 9 rebounds. He's basically been 10 rebounds per 36 for his whole career. And an efficient player, 50 from the field mostly throughout his career, 36 from 3 on 8 attempts per 36 last year. So he's going to be a good fit in a number of ways, I think. And I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table and how they're going to utilize him. I thought this was an awesome move. And obviously, if you missed it yesterday, Celtics salary dump George Nyang, who I wasn't super thrilled about his fit here and what he was going to bring to the table. And obviously, he was at like 8 million, 8.8 million, something like that. So not a huge surprise that they end up moving on from him here in Utah. Austin Ainge does Boston a real solid here, taking him into a trade exception. So they move off that 8-9 million in full here, give up a couple second rounders. The second rounders, according to Jake King, was a 27 Magic pick that they got from moving back this year. That was theirs originally. They traded to Orlando and then got back this year. I think that went out for Evan Fournier to do some pick trade history here. So that's moved around a lot. So that's going to Utah. And then 31 that they got with Nyang from Atlanta is going to Utah as well. So that effectively goes with Nyang over to Utah. So 2 seconds, but 2 seconds they had gotten, for some cap maneuvering already here. So not huge losses.
Also, I don't
Nyang
think
moves on.
Second rounders aren't the NIL stuff has really weakened the pool of second round draft picks. That's what obviously the Raptors have had quite a few of them over the past couple of years. And I've really noticed like guys that I've really liked and that I've noticed other like teams have liked and talk about. A lot of those guys, they stay. And those guys come back a year later and then they sneak into the first round. And it's just like, well, next year's supposed to be really strong. So I wonder, but 2026, I mean, we'll see. But this year's second round draft class was definitely not incredibly strong. The year before, not incredibly strong. So the second round pool is definitely second rounders. I understand from a cap perspective are really nice. And there's definitely guys who have hit, but it's not the cheat code that it used to be because the NIL guys, they go like, why would you go to the NBA for a second round deal if you can just get like $6 million from Michigan or something, like Jackson Lendeborg. So there's, it's not as a big a deal as it used to be, I think.
Yeah, and the international scouting's gotten to a point where the Jokic's of the world, I don't think are sliding to the second round the way they used to. And you saw it with Hansen Yang this year.
I loved
slated
him.
To go second round.
When we did our draft stuff, he was still, I think he was projected like between 30 and 40. And I was like, I think this guy's one of the best bigs in the draft because I loved his tape. And then he went 16 and I was like, oh, yeah, nobody will ever fall again, it seems. It's just like guys will get picked.
No way. So that's come a long way, in the 10 years now, plus since Jokic went and other guys have fallen. So I think that's a good observation. And, the caps stuff on all that too makes it so that you're just not getting the same value there necessarily. It's going to be more guys if you're trying to make them take two ways and do the different things to shave off money. You're just not going to be getting as quality of a player there. And I think you saw it with the Celtics this year too, who moved back and got a couple two-way guys who looked okay in summer league between Amari Williams and Max Shulga, but probably going to be up in Maine this year for the most part. They're not going to be ready to go guys. So Yeah, I agree on the second round stuff there. And I want to talk some Pacers too, because you did a tremendous job covering that Pacers run. It's the first time we've had you on since the Pacers went
Oh
to the
yeah,
finals, and
I got
probably should have
replaced
won.
on my other podcast, so I'm here doing this one.
We'll get to that in a second. But first, I want to shout out PrizePicks, where there's still a lot of action going on this summer. Women's basketball in full swing. Love adding Asia Wilson to my lineup. Brittany Sykes is going out to Seattle, Syracuse's star who got traded by Washington. So I love building women's basketball lineups here, daily fantasy over on PrizePicks, and hopefully Caitlyn Clark will be back soon, and some of the other injured stars. I know Angel Reese was off the court for a little bit as well. So you can do that every day. Check out what they're going to project for points, rebounds, assists, and if you've played PrizePicks, it's more or less on points, assists, rebounds for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Best place to win cash while watching sports. Baseball going on now as well. Went to a baseball game last night. Some big performances from Willie Abreu, Trevor Story, but the Stars driving this thing. Lindor, Ohtani. Those are the guys you want to add to your lineup any given night. Again, more or less on hits, home runs, steals, all the stat lines on the baseball field. And you can combine players from different leagues too. So you can draft an Asia Wilson as well as an Ohtani to your team, and boom, you got your team for that night. So go over there, sign up, use the code CLNS, and when you play $5, you'll get $50 instantly. $50 bonus is guaranteed. You don't even need to win to receive the bonus. So go over there again, CLNS. When you play your first lineup, $5, you'll get 50 instantly, and a lot of free promotions going on, free squares. Taco Tuesday was yesterday with player projection discounts up to 25%. You got Flex Friday, where you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect, and double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So go check that out. Again, CLNS gets you $50 when you play at $5 over on PrizePicks. Run your game. So the Pacers, man, it was a fun watch. It was fun watching you guys break it down. And unfortunately, in a parallel to the Celtics' fate, Tyrese Halliburton goes down in Game 7. And I was so scared going into Game 6, I believe, where he was already dealing with that, because I'm like, oh, calf, you know how that can go sometimes. And he got through the game, wasn't himself, but played well. And you thought, all right, he's past this. So I wasn't even thinking about it going into Game 7. And then it happened a game later than I thought it would. So awful. I think they would have won that game if that didn't happen. Who knows? But great run. We already talked about some of the impact that what they did will have on the league. And I think the team building stuff's less pertinent because so much of it was random and lucky and opportunistic, especially with the Halliburton stuff moving on from Sacramento. But play style and utilizing depth and the interchangeability of some of their ball handlers, and there's just so much stuff you can pull from that run. The pressing that they did, it was one of the more impressive basketball runs at any level I've seen. And even though they didn't win the championship, it's definitely a team worth remembering for a long time.
Yeah, I thought that, I guess this isn't exactly a novel takeaway. Most people had this, but the Pacers were displaying some of the more forward-thinking offensive principles, and the Thunder were displaying some of the more forward-thinking defensive principles. And I think both styles will help inform how the next, 2-3 years of the NBA looks, at least on the margins, because of course, you can't decide like immediately, hey, we're going to play like the Pacers do, or because it's obviously you play according to your skill set and your personnel. But on the margins, you can ask for a couple of different things. Like the press defense, the Pacers obviously were probably the best at it over the past 2 years at implementing it and ramping it up. But that started with Chauncey Billups and the Trailblazers. He was the one who was like, well, I think we're going to do this because we're young. And when I was a guard, I hated when this happened to me. And then once it started happening, I guess more on the wide scale of the NBA, then teams kind of look at it and get to dive into big heaps of data and then see trends start. Like, oh, what does this kind of defense inform over 48 minutes? What happens here? How does it affect primary ball handler statistics? How does it change the rhythm of offense? And the Pacers, who were looking for a way to keep Tyrese Halliburton out of actions and looking for a way to keep Miles Turner, like in a more limited role, because he definitely, his defense took a big step back. They were like, well, if we set the terms of engagement with press defense through largely Nembhard and Nesmith and Pascal obviously can too on forwards, and then bringing guys like TJ and Shepherd off the bench, then we can definitely be able to bring something there. So that was cool to see. And then offensively, I mean, nobody really does it like Tyrese, just whipping the ball around and understanding where the defense is leaning, where the ball should go, hit aheads, switching the play from one side of the court to another. Just so impressive in that regard. So they were a fun team to watch, man. And then, Pascal operating as like a Swiss Army knife who filled the holes defensively, who filled the holes offensively, and who ended up taking the marquee matchup basically every series. They just played fun basketball. And I think I tend to agree with you, like not to do, obviously the Raptors are the team I've covered. Injuries happen and teams go on to win. It is what it is. But I would have loved to see Tyrese, who had like 9 points in 7 minutes, have his game and see where that game 7 ended up. It would have been awesome. But
and then when he goes down, you're like, all right, hopefully they can win it for him, just from the storyline perspective, and wanting to see that run affirm, because unfortunately they won't get the same treatment the champions have, even though there's probably a case that they had a better season than teams that actually won the championship. And that, goes back to the ring conversation, and just how every year is a little different, and the competitions not always the same and all that stuff. Like their upset win over the Knicks, and again, I thought the Knicks were going to win that series, was super impressive, especially the way they flipped the first game with Aaron Nesmith, the former Celtic, pulling off one of the all-time performances. And it's so tough to me, because when you think of these championship runs and moments teams had along the way, like they had the Halliburton game winners and the comebacks and that performance by Nesmith, like those are the sort of stuff that just go down in legend in a city, when a team wins a championship. And I hope Indiana and fans there specifically are able to appreciate it the same way, because again, you don't have the trophy, you don't have the rings, and you weren't the champion, but you had all those championship moments. And again, who knows what happens if there isn't that injury in the 7th game, and what was, I think, a 16-16 game at that point. So I think about like 2022 with the Celtics too. Like it was such a impressive, crucial season. Obviously they win the championship down the line, so it ends up becoming part of the story, and maybe the Pacers can do that here, but it's going to be a little tough because Achilles tear knocks Halliburton out for this season. Obviously it's a difficult one to come back even when he does. Miles Turner goes out the door, which was pretty stunning. I think it's something that they can recover from, but not super easily. And this is going to be just like for Boston and all the stuff we mentioned with them, a challenging year. Like, what is it? Jay Huff at center. I like that move. They have Isaiah Jackson back. There's still a lot of continuity here. I know Rick Carlo told Caitlyn that Matherin's going to start, and I think he took a real leap during the playoffs. So to me, and I think it's interesting to compare Boston and Indiana because they're at a similar place in the conference and just where their teams and rosters are at. I think the Pacers are pretty well equipped to exceed expectations this year. I think their over-unders at like 39. I could definitely see them being 500 or above with what they have right now, but a lot of it's going to fall on Nembhard sliding over for a full season. Siakam's going to have to be the driver of this offense in a way that Jaylen Brown's going to have to be in Boston this year. And a lot of guys are going to have to step up, specifically at center, where it's going to be Jackson, James Wiseman coming off Achilles himself, and Huff, who I love. I really like that addition for them.
Yeah, I think I would take the over there as well. It should be interesting to see how much, because Nembhard, obviously his stats in the playoffs are great. He's efficient. He runs a good pick and roll, but a lot of that comes from the benefit of, and I know you watched mine and Caitlyn's work of running the 4-on-4 offense when Halliburton kind of takes his press defense guard out of, or if it's Bridges, a wing out of the offense, and they play 4-on-4. It's obviously everyone who's played basketball knows less people on the floor, easier to get buckets. Nembhard should be really interesting to monitor. Matherin, I think, is primed. And that's the thing is Siakam, when he went from Toronto to Indiana, it was a huge jump in usage downward. And he was like, okay, I'm playing a different role. For a year, ratcheting it back up, this is the guy who just a couple years ago led the NBA in isolations, led the NBA in closeouts, and led the NBA in minutes played per game. Just like under Nick Nurse, just a titan of work and creation. And so it should be interesting to see what style the Pacers play, because they do want to play that style, but Halliburton on the controls is just much different than anybody else. So I'm really into these two teams, as you said, being evaluated similarly. I think one makes sense, and they both are going to be radically different than what we've seen of them from what we understand of these teams, and it's it's necessitated by injury. So I don't know. We'll see, man. I think probably, I know I'm on a Celtics podcast, but Pacers, maybe I'd expect them to have a little bit better of a record than the Celtics.
That's how I'm feeling too. And when I first stacked the teams up, I did put Boston ahead of Indy. But the more I thought about it, like you look back to that East Finals between Boston and Indy, and when Halliburton goes down, the Pacers are leading in those games 3 and 4 without him and trying to figure it out. They came up with great game plans to make it work without him. I think Siakam has filled that primary scoring role more often in his career than Jalen has to this point, because Jason's just been there every night for his whole career. He hasn't missed any time in his career. Now he's going to miss a full season. So I think for Boston's top tier, top end players, they're capable, right? White, of taking on more responsibility. Pritchard, certainly, Brown, but those guys haven't done it yet. Indiana, Siakam's done it going back to Toronto after Kawhi left, and Nembhard did it in those East Finals, and TJ McConnell even has experience with it off the bench. So, there's a lot of guys there who have already stepped up into bigger roles in their careers, and Carlisle's had to do it without Halliburton for long stretches as well when he's been out with injury over the last couple of years. So we've seen Indiana do it without Halliburton. We haven't seen Boston do it without Tatum. So for that reason, I'm going to go Indiana over Boston, even if it's by a hair. I like Jay Huff too, most out of all those centers. I'll keep going back to that. I can't believe they got him for a couple seconds on a 3-year deal where he's basically making like $8 million over 3 years. So I don't know how they pulled that off, but that filled that center spot well, I thought, along with some of the other guys coming back there. So I'll describe it this way, I guess. I like Boston's 1 through 3 better on their depth chart, but Indiana by far has the better 3 through 8, 9. So it's a depth league now to me. And, when I stack up, there's 5 teams I'm interested in, and maybe you want to throw Toronto in here. I know Michael Pina did when I talked to him yesterday. He had them 9th, I believe, and he had Boston 12th. So I wasn't even thinking about Toronto in this conversation, but I guess you can put them in there. But I stacked up Miami 6, probably Milwaukee 7, 8 I'd go Indy, 9 Boston, 10 Philly, and then Chicago, Toronto on the outside looking in. Just because Miami's the healthiest, they have the most guys there. They got the coach. Milwaukee's got Giannis, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that, even if I don't love their offense, supporting cast around them. Philly, I just can't give the benefit of the doubt to with the health stuff. I mean, those 2 guys aren't even going to be there to start the year, I don't think. So I guess I'll check back in when they are, even though I like some of their younger guys. And then Boston, Indiana, I think they're playing teams. I think they're at least in the play-in mix. I don't see those 2 teams, barring injury, and they're very susceptible to injury because they're already hurt. So I'll give the benefit of the doubt to the teams that are healthy right now. And for Boston, Indiana, they got a lot to figure out. So I'm going to put them in that 8, 9 territory.
I would put, if I'm ranking, Toronto is definitely for me in the play-in situation. And if I'm being a homer, I'm being a homer. But I think from my perspective of analyzing, I think they have all the all the reason and all the motivation to make a jump. Like they weren't healthy at all last year. They're definitely
Raptors?
more Raptors. They're definitely a much more talented team now. And while I understand when people look from the outside looking in saying, what exactly is the path to being like a contender in the future? I understand that being like, well, Ingram isn't going to take you there, but Ingram will definitely help them win games.
So I
Scotty
have
being
two
healthy.
questions with them.
Yeah.
One, the depth. I love the starting five, the 5 players specifically there. I don't know what they have behind it, even though Grady Dick took some strides and Jamal Shed shown, some good moments. And, there's definitely guys off that bench, and they drafted a top 10 player this year as well, who I'm not super familiar with. But
he's fun. Celtics fans who have watched a lot of like ball pressure and like badgering defense, he would fit well there.
That's what they wanted to do, right? Like, they were the second best defensive team down the stretch last year. So he fits that style that they want to play there. So there's definitely some pieces to work with there. So depth's my first question with them. Second is the amount of guys there who I think are at their best with the ball in their hands. And I have questions about when they don't. Barrett, obviously, back to his Duke days, and I watched him a lot at Duke. Whenever he had the ball, I always thought he was a much better player. And when he was off the ball, I didn't really know how it fit. New York, too, with him. Ingram, I think it's a similar story. And Barnes, I know you're the king of the Barnes.
I actually don't have that reputation within the fan base, because like I know for me, I do the work, and I know a lot of people from outside the market see my work on the Raptors, but there's a lot of people who are kind of like in just a Toronto bubble who go way harder for Scotty than me. Like
I just know you want the ball in his hands probably for his development and where his career is going. So I don't know. How do they, and even quickly too, like he's probably the most suited to play off ball out of all those guys, but he's another guy who I think is at his best when he's, creating off the bounce there. So it's tough to me when there's one ball and 4 guys who are primary creators to me. Maybe I'm reading that wrong from the outside, but that's been my perspective on the Raptors. And obviously the benefit of that is if guys go down, like someone else can just step into that spot. Yeah. So they're well suited to deal with injuries, but I don't know. How well do those guys complement each other?
I think it is an underrated fit. And because honestly, like Scotty does need the ball in some cases for reps and development, but he is much better as an off-ball player right now, because as a play finisher, he's obviously very strong at the rim. He pressures the offensive glass a bunch. As a hub, he's a really talented playmaker at his size, obviously. As a guy who complements other players, he's truly, truly special in that regard. We saw last year, he was on the ball all the time getting reps and development, and he was not special in that regard at all. He struggled a lot. RJ Barrett, when Siakam was still on the team and when they were playing not through him, his true shooting percentage was around like 60%, because he was running out in transition, he was cutting more, and he was taking mostly spot-up threes instead of pull-ups. His shot mechanics do not lend towards pull-ups at all. So RJ, I don't think is better with the ball. I actually think the only guy who's better with the ball and that you'd want to give the ball to repeatedly is Ingram. Mm-hmm. And Ingram has said that he's planning on cutting more this year, on more catch and shoot 3-point opportunities. So of course players say this stuff. Everyone has an idealized version of themselves and their team. But I think as long as the hierarchy is established from Darko and these players are put in the right positions, they have the skill set to play very well. However, they're healthy. Yeah. And their tendencies are going to dominate this, because Quickly is an unbelievable shooter, but he's just lazy as an off-ball mover, and he floats. He doesn't form up to, like, Celtics fans will know what it looks like for guys to form up to drivers and to really make yourself available for drive and kick opportunities. Quickly floats out above the perimeter. He doesn't help out that much. His catch and shoot volume is so low for the level of shooter he is. It's guys have to change how they apply their skill sets, but the skill sets and the talent is definitely there for the Raptors. It's just, it's a change in how they play. So they have the potential, but I understand why people would look at it and be like, but I'm around the team. I've watched these guys a lot, and I see the path for optimism, I guess.
Yeah, there's a path for sure for them, and they got close late in the year. They were pretty close to that last playing spot and breaking through there. So they were moving in that direction. They're in a similar spot to Portland almost, where they're bringing in talent and they're young guys coming up, and they're on the edge and precipice of that playoff spot. And it looked like they want to take a leap this year based on what they did. And what they try to do, I thought was really intriguing for both teams, because I mentioned this to you when we were out at Summer League, and we've heard it from a couple reporters now that the Raptors offered their number 9 pick and RJ Barrett for Derek White. Now, I don't know what else was in this deal. If this was all it was, I understand Boston turning it down. And obviously, there's a 2-year contract with Barrett that they didn't want to take on. And I also heard that, Holiday, this could have been in play for Holiday too. I'm not as certain about that, but it makes sense too, his skill set and what they're looking for. Obviously, Holiday does a lot of the same stuff as White, and Boston was looking to get off that long-term deal in Holiday, but that would have been a 3-year deal for a 2-year deal coming back in Barrett, and they ended up getting a 1-year contract back in Simon. So I think a lot of this stuff lines up. I think it made a ton of sense for Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Swapping in one of those guys with a shooter, with a secondary ball handler. I mean, Derek White in place of Barrett makes all of this stuff make sense for the Raptors. Even Holiday, I think, in place of Barrett, at least for a year or two, could have made some stuff make sense there and would have fit their defensive identity. So I don't know. I would turn this down to give up White. I think you can get a lot more from White, and there probably was a lot more first-round picks at least out there for White. And I didn't love the talent available at number 9 when it got there necessarily, at least to, stack up to what White's become for Boston. So I like Barrett. Money aside, I probably would have taken Barrett at 9 for Holiday over Simons, and I think that's showing now. But this is an interesting conversation that happened here, and I'm sure they probably had some interest in what Jaylen Brown would have cost as well. So nothing happened here, but an interesting offer here for Derek White at the very least.
Yeah, I believe the Holiday one, I'm pretty sure, is a different structure. Like it was, I don't think there's a pick. But with White, I think there was. And from the Raptors, as you said, putting Derek White in place of RJ Barrett in the Raptors starting lineup, suddenly everything connects and makes sense.
There's like contender ceiling there at that point.
And then, but from the Celtics perspective, I think that would be kind of like you're kicking the can down the road, not to Tatum's first year back, but maybe to a second or third year back. Like you're kind of giving up on the window, because Derek White is he's obviously essential to any deep run that the Celtics have, and replacing him immediately would become incredibly hard because he's such a unique and fantastic player. He's the archetype that a lot of 2 guards coming into the league want to emulate. And
duo, certainly.
Yeah. And on top of that, you keep them because you believe in the short term of when Tatum returns. And I think that makes sense for Boston, because I know they've had to make moves and had to kind of like juggle everything, but getting rid of White, I think, would have signaled like, oh man, this path is longer than I thought.
Yeah, and he's so coveted, and I think as teams start to want to take a leap, and Portland certainly wanted to do that with Holiday, so they take on his deal, which wasn't a great one. And I think Boston was fortunate to move off that the way they did, even though Simon's coming back is in flux a little bit. I don't know what his long-term future is going to be here, but White's a guy who, in the short term for Boston, once Tatum gets back, is crucial to getting back to where they want to be. But also, I think is only going to grow in value over time. Like, I think he's going to have another good year here. He's still relatively young, and he's ascending. Like, every year, it seems like he's getting better from 3, more versatile. Defensively last year, I mean, it was against Toronto, right, where he was playing the 5 and just blocking shots repeatedly at the rim. And I think it was some sort of zone look that they were playing around with that night. And so this guy's just perfect. And I'm sure every team called Boston to see what it would cost.
Yeah.
Even more so than Brown, because I just think Brown fits onto a team, like if we want to use Toronto, for example, in an uncertain position of, all right, is this guy actually going to be the star and the hub of everything we're doing? Because he hasn't done that in his career, at least for a full season. When you're putting White on a team, it's like, all right, is he going to defend, shoot threes on and off the ball, create a little bit on and off the ball, screen? Like, is that going to fit here? And every team's going to say yes. So this is a guy that I think, and I know it's been described as, can they get a Mikal Bridges offer, like what the Nets did for, moving him over to the Knicks. And that's what I think it's going to come to. If Boston does have to trade Brown or White eventually to make this rebuild, retool work, and maybe get things on more of a younger timeline, I think there will be a team that steps up to the plate eventually and says, all right, 4 or 5 firsts, I guess we'll do it. And Toronto's not there yet, right? Like, they're not going to make that
would
move
shock
right now and
me.
be a championship team, right? Because you have to feel good about winning a championship to do something like that. But if things go way better than expected for Toronto this year, and they really want to make an aggressive move to get in that conversation, or next year maybe even after this one, that's where it's like, okay, next summer, are you having conversations about White for many more firsts and a lot more value here? Because again, I don't think this is enough for White, even though I like Barrett.
If I'm a contender this season, like as long as I'm a contender in the NBA for that's, I don't know how old White is, between 30 and 32.
He's like 30,
right now.
31.
30?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for like the next 3 years, if I'm a contender, I call the Celtics every 3 weeks to see what's up, because I'm just like, this guy would fit and this guy would make sense. Regardless, like there's contenders are made up of a bunch of different teams. Like there's the Thunder, the Pacers, the Celtics were a contender, obviously, the Knicks, the Nuggets, the Timberwolves. It's like, who doesn't White fit on? There isn't a team. So if I'm a contender, regardless of my makeup, I call every 3 weeks to be like, what's up? Until Brad blocks my number. I'm just trying to see. I'm just trying to see what's going on.
Well, that's evidently how they handled it this offseason. I understand that. But there will come a time, I think, where they're going to have to heavily consider what they can get back for Brown. I think less so, just because it's $50 million, and I think there's a small number of teams that can make it happen and actually give you value back for that kind of thing. But White, again, I think you could start a bidding war between 5 to 10 teams potentially to just get this haul of a return. And
it broke my heart when they got him, man. I wanted the Raptors to get him, and they got him. I know, the Cavs. I couldn't believe it, man. Oh,
it's still amazing, and it's one of the great trades ever, I think, because you think of where they were when they were making it, and then where they ended up for the next 3-4 years. I mean, there was a world where it becomes a dynasty, and certainly there were a number of reasons that didn't end up working out this year to go back to back. But he did his part, and health and some other stuff prevented them from becoming that. So, is he part of what's next? I think that's a real question here, and that is the last question I got for you with Boston here. Is like, what is the pathway to what's next? Is it just Brown and Tatum continuing to get better once they're back from these injuries? Is it drafting? Is it making some savvy trades? Because even let's say the roster's in the same place next year and it's just Tatum coming back, that's not going to be good enough to win a championship.
I think they can help themselves, obviously, with some moves on the margins. Like the White move is great. Another move on the margins that obviously helped another team is and it was at the Celtics' expense, is like Nesmith going to the Pacers. There are always guys available that you can kind of rebuild and reshape Pritchard, it's not like he was a super high pick, but he's obviously very impactful. Whether you believe he can step into a starting lineup role and really win, or whether you'd prefer being him coming off the bench, I don't know. But it's tough to consider what a Jaylen Brown trade looks like. I don't think that there's a ton of appetite around the league for bringing Jaylen Brown in, what it would cost, that intersection. I think
the teams that made the most sense, I just don't think ever got interested enough in it, because San Antonio could have moved too. I think you listen for that, plus some future picks. Houston could have did what they did for Durant for him and went with Durant, even though he's 37 or whatever he is at this point. I'm trying to think, is there one more team maybe? Toronto could have, right? If they really wanted to there, and I don't think that was ever a significant thing they were interested in. So, yeah, there's just not a team out there that screams, we need Jaylen, and we got to be super aggressive to do it. Maybe Brooklyn when they finally decide to cash in on all these assets, but that's going to be down the line quite a ways.
Yeah, when I think about It has to be towards the end of his contract, probably the last 2 years, and a team is like, you know what, let's go get him and see. Because right now you're bringing him in as like probably the number one piece for your team, and if not
And for
that,
Boston, their power still to me is Tatum and Brown. Like having those two
yeah,
guys, their interchangeability, their dynamic. They don't play super naturally off each other, but just the combined size, skill set, and width of their impact keeps them in play to make the playoffs at the very least every single year. And then from there, you see what happens.
yeah. Basically, the Celtics need to find their way to a quality center, and they need probably like a one more wing on the team. If they can do that in the next 3 years, then having the same structure will work because Tatum and Brown and Derek White, presumably at the very end of his prime, that's going to put you in a position to win games. And honestly, some ingenuity from their coach, changing play styles, what advantages can be gained. That's a real aspect of this too. Like the Pacers, I know everyone started talking about like it's not about the strong link, but the weak link and how they play and everything like that. It was really important that the Pacers had depth, but also their play style was really important too. And they got really great performances. If the Celtics, like, they didn't play very well and Tatum got injured. If the Celtics play really well this past season, they still have the potential to be champions. And coming back and, once Tatum is back and if they keep the same team and find like a decent front court option, then a really good playoff performance, it might warrant them being in the finals. It might warrant them being there because they are operating from such a position of strength with Tatum and Brown and then guys like White hovering around that. Maybe Pritchard becomes something, maybe Simons becomes something. I don't know. But yeah, it's there's still upside with the team. It's just injuries suck. That's all.
Yep. For both these teams. And man, make sure to appreciate that East Finals. We watched these Pacers and Celtics play a couple years ago, and yeah, that was an all-time competitive series, maybe the best sweep ever, quality of play wise.
That first game, man, oh my days. Jalen, what a shot.
Yeah, and we missed out on the rematch last year, which would have been fun, and especially with Boston playing at their peak. But they were never really able to sustain that last year and repeat what they did the same way for various reasons. So last question I got for you. With Pacers down, with Celtics down, who's going to fill that gap and take over the East this year? Who do you see coming out of the East now after those two teams won it the last 2 years?
I'm still a believer in the Cavaliers. I really like that team.
You think this is their time finally?
Yeah, I don't like. I understand the Knicks have a spot. The Bucks, as somebody who covered the Pacers, Miles Turner is really healthy for how the Pacers wanted to play his skill set, but like his defense is just not at the level that I think people think it is. And offensively, Turner is a good center, but I don't think Turner, because they waived Dame and they effectively pay Turner to make that happen. They pay like $50 million. I don't think that, and Giannis is obviously great, but I don't think it'll be the Bucks coming out. The Pacers and the Celtics are the two other teams I would consider. The Knicks, I think the Knicks or the Cavs probably, and I would go with the Cavs because I am a really big believer in their guard creation. And Mobley could take another step this year. They make sense to me. The Cavs.
So Mobley's everything for me, and he's not a super compelling character, personality around the league. I don't think a lot of people think about Mobley, fans rather. To me, last year though, it's like, okay, he's scratching the surface of what I think he can become, and that's one of the best players in the league. And there was an all defense, defensive player of the year ceiling he showed on that end. But on offense, they started having him bring the ball up the floor, and he's stepping in the threes, and he's creating offense for them. And he's part of that cutting scheme you described earlier. Like, to me, there were moments last year, and it happened very slowly. Like, you sort of saw him going through it methodically, and it didn't look supernatural. But he is starting to creep into star territory on offense. And when that becomes natural, and when those decisions happen quicker for him, and when he becomes the hub of what they're doing offensively, and I think that's there for him. Like, I think he's that smart and that skilled. There's, I don't know if this is still going to be the version of that Cavs team when he gets to that level, but if he can get there sooner rather than later, there still is a championship in play for Cleveland.
Yeah.
But, it's still the Mitchell show. Garland, I think there's a lot of turbulence with his game on both ends of the floor that I've never been super crazy about, especially come playoff time. When he becomes a target.
Love Garland. I
love Garland,
his
but
game so much.
He's killed them in some playoff situations. Allen's playing the 5 there, so Mobley's still not quite their 5. So, there's so much talent there, and the coaching was amazing last year, and they had this awesome season. But I still feel like this isn't the final version of what Mobley in particular is going to be. Because to me, the only player there who's like, all right, this guy can bring us to a championship, even as great as Mitchell is, and he is great, is that finished version of Mobley. And I'm obsessing over this because I'm such a fan of his game. I loved him coming into the draft, and I've loved that slow development that's almost happened under the radar there in Cleveland. Because again, he's not the superstar personality. He's a big man, and he's not like one of these perimeter wings that people are buying jerseys of and all that. But man, he's got it, and I see it happening. And when it happens, people are gonna be like, "Whoa! Where'd this come from?"
I agree with you that there's a lot of upside there. I think he doesn't have to. I think for a championship, he would have to reach that. But to win the Eastern Conference, I don't think he would have to. I think they could come out of the Eastern Conference with that. But
they just have to play well and be healthy, really.
Yeah. And Garland, obviously his one playoff run was tough. This one, I don't want to dock him for it because he had to get surgery on his foot. But he and Donovan are so creative out of the backcourt. And they're still it's easy to suggest that Garland could improve. He's still young. It's really easy to suggest that Mobley could improve. There's no reason for Donovan or Jarrett to fall off. That team in a conference where a lot of guys, a lot of injuries and a lot of teams had to reshuffle, they're just still there and just really good. But I still probably would be Thunder, Nuggets, Wolves, all those teams I'd probably pick over the Cavs. But
and definitely they did the Okoro for Ball thing, which I didn't love. I don't know what Ball has left at this point. And
he was fun last year, but on a team that wasn't that good. It'll be interesting to see him on an important team.
Yeah, and if he can even just scratch the surface of becoming the old Ball, which again, it was so long ago he was there, that you're like, all right, this is a really nice piece and part of what we're doing here. And he doesn't have to do a ton, obviously, right, when they're healthy. But, I'm trying to think of who else is still on that roster, too, because they lost Ty Jerome. I like Jalen Tyson. I hope he can start playing a little bit this year. Strus is great. Merrill's still there. He'll have to take on a bigger role. Dean Wade's still there, who's a great defender. And then, of course, they got Hunter, who I thought was phenomenal. So, this team's stacked with depth. And again, it's a depth game now. So, I like them.
They don't come out of the East. They have to look in the mirror, man. They played the Pacers, who were the Pacers weren't the odds-on favorite to win any series, and they comfortably took care of quite a few teams. So the Pacers were just underrated, but they got their licks in. Come back this year, you're okay, we played a team that could have won a championship. The Pacers were close. Now we learned something. Let's come back. But if the Cavs don't come out of the East, man, they really have to look in the mirror. There's something wrong.
I know. It'll be devastating. And I'll feel bad for them, the fans, all that, because they have everything they need, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time. The opportunity's here. All the excuses and competition and all that are out the window. I know Garland's hurt to start the year, but hopefully he'll be all right. So, there is no reason it shouldn't be them when you just look at what they have here. So, they're going to have to do it, and they should be considered the favorite for sure. And I don't have any disagreement with that. I like the Magic a lot too, but I think they have a lot more questions than the Knicks and the Cavs do, especially on offense as they try to figure out some stuff there. But appreciate you stopping by here. Always a joy to talk basketball with you. I think you're one of the best doing it. And again, Raptors coverage, you got it over there at Raptors Republic. You going to be doing some Pacers stuff again this year? Is it in the cards?
Yeah, I know. I made the joke about Rick Carlisle replacing me on the podcast, but Caitlyn and I will do lots of Pacers work this upcoming year.
Well, Caitlyn, I can't get Caitlyn on the pod here anymore. She's a superstar. We used to have her all the time.
Well, she's I haven't had Caitlyn on my podcast in a long time. She's just busy, you know.
Yeah,
That's what happens. Like you just get busy, man. It's like
she
such
should.
a busy.
I mean, it's amazing. I know Rick was saying that teams were calling her, and all these different people wanted to have her work for them. As these TV networks get going, and different like broadcasts, right? Like, I'd love to listen to her on a game. Like, I think like she'd be perfect color commentary on NBC. Like, that should happen. And fortunately, we're able to get her work.
Well,
over on the Patreon there.
That was when we were covering the finals. Like, that was the Doris Burke story, right? Like, we're going in to the offices and everything, and Doris and RJ and Mike Breen had just done like a one-on-one with Rick, and so we were walking in, and Doris was like, whoa, she was like, oh my god, she's like, I watch every single episode of you guys. She's all excited. And then she asked Caitlyn, she's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to do broadcasting? Do you want to do coaching? Like, what? It was like in that moment, Doris Burke was like, can I put you on a broadcast? It was just
so
Caitlyn,
I mean, what was it like?
she wants.
You were there in the finals, knowing like Tyrese like is a fan and like consumes that. Like, I think the whole team, the whole organization is like, how does it feel knowing that like NBA personnel, NBA players are going to your stuff throughout the playoffs there, and watching what you guys are doing and just like consuming that?
Well, it's cool. We actually knew before that, obviously. Like, it is crazy to think that head coaches of, like, it's not just Rick who watches the podcast or reads the stuff. Like, head coaches of other teams do, and like scouts of other teams do. As crazy as that sounds, it's not just players, it's like personnel, and it's it was cool. Like, everyone from like Zach Lowe down, like all of these like writers Hall of Fame level people are coming up and telling us like, we think you do such a great job. It was like the players, the media, the coaches, everyone was really excited about our analysis, which was really neat. Obviously, like, it's cool when it happens in public because you talk to players, obviously, but when Tyrese Halliburton is giving me love and Pascal's giving me love, it's like, oh, this is cool. Because like, you don't want to be a loser and talk about it and be like, well, but if they do it in front of cameras, then everyone can see it. So it was just, it was cool to have so many people express like appreciation for the work. But I'll say, like, so much of that just goes to Caitlyn. I'm a co-host, yes, and I do the work, yes, but Caitlyn is definitely, her analysis leads us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I shout it out all the time, but go subscribe to Basketball She Wrote. And again, check out Samson's work over on Raptors Republic. And you can find him on Twitter at Sam Folk, FOLKK. So appreciate you stopping by here. And we will be back, I hope, this time for real next week after a bunch of shows to start this week. But to recap, if you missed it, we talked Chris Boucher a ton at the start of the pod, what he's going to bring to Boston. And obviously, to clear the way for that, the Celtics traded George Nyang to Utah. That's it for us here. For Samson Folk, I'm Bobby Manning. This has been a Wednesday edition of the Garden Report. We'll talk to you sometime next week, and peace.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way. Let's
Yeah.
fly out over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke